right. All right, so it is 5 p.m. PST. So it is time to get started. Hi, everybody. My name is Lori Black. I'm the Associate Director of the Lowell Milken Center for Music of American Jewish Experience here at the UCLA Herb Alpert School of Music. We are very excited to continue from last year our workshop series. Our workshop series is one of the many programs that makes us unique in that we offer public programming in which you can really be a part of it and really learn something new about a culture that you may or may not know already and build upon it. So we're really excited to kick this off. If you are interested in other programming of the American Jewish Experience, and if you are here, chances are you are interested in more of our programming, please think about joining our mailing list. I am putting a link right now in the chat. And this will take you to our website where you can read about all of our programming and join our mailing list. We do have a number of programs coming up. November 14th at 9:30 a.m. will be the third installment of our lecture series and symposia series, Kol Nidre Audio Visual Dramaturgies. And it will be a very interesting program that has been co-organized by Professor Mark Kligman, our director, and Dr. Ruthie Abelievich of the University of Haifa. Part 3, Religious Dramaturgies, explores historical and present-day liminal dynamics of the Kol Nidre, the very nature of the Kol Nidre's incongruencies and inner tensions. So please join us for that. And then November 16th, you can join us for a Meet the Composer session with composer Charles Fox, a fascinating composer who has written for TV, film, and the pop world. So we hope you will all be there. Our program tonight is with an amazing individual who we've had the opportunity to present in a different format, actually, in our inaugural year. Dr. Sam Thomas is a multi-instrumentalist, saxophone who plays saxophone, oud, is a singer, plays ney, clarinet, percussion. I have gotten to see him play a number of these instruments, and it's amazing. He's a composer, band leader, and a professor of ethnomusicology, Jewish studies, and interdisciplinary studies. He is actively forging an artistic scholarly model for over 15 years. His scholarship and performance center on musics of the Middle East and North Africa, worldwide Jewish musics and jazz-based traditions, as well as Sephardi Mizrahi studies in poetry, rabbinic thought, and diaspora studies. Dr. Twarzman Thomas is band leader of Asefa Jazz, and Traveling in Pairs, as well as artistic director of the New York Andalus Ensemble, a multi-ethnic large ensemble featuring a choir and instrumentalists performing traditional musics of North Africa and Spain in Hebrew, Arabic, and Spanish. He's the director of curriculum and institutional programming at the Brooklyn Music School, as well as an adjunct assistant professor of ethnomusicology and Jewish studies at several campuses of the City University of New York and Montclair State University. We are very lucky to have him here for this wonderful workshop. Everybody, Samuel Twarzman Thomas.
Thank you. Thank you, Lori. Thank you. Nice to be here with UCLA's center again, and the Milken Center. It's a different experience this time around for sure, zooming in, but this is a whole nother opportunity to connect with all of you tonight. Well, it's nighttime here. It's 8 o'clock in New York. Welcome to my studio. You see here my own personal studio here in the background. I thought about what we're going to do tonight, and certainly going to have a interactive component. So I hope that folks, you're ready to kind of do some stuff on your end as well. The program I've sent to Lori in advance to share with you is kind of a handout that focuses on Mizrahi musical traditions. So first,
link is in the chat.
Oh, good. It's in the chat. Excellent. So I'm going to share it anyway on my screen. I think we can start from there. First and foremost, of course, this program is really focusing a little bit more exclusively on the Mizrahi side of things. Just the other night, I was really focusing just on the North African side of things. And often, and I guess a couple months ago, I was just focusing on the klezmer side of things. A lot of time, that's a little bit of an odd thing for me because, as Lori knows, I mean, from seeing me perform, a lot of times it really is a combination of all of these avenues of Jewish musical expression. So, but tonight we're focusing on the Mizrahi side of things. So, on the Eastern side of the Jewish musical tradition world, and that means that we're centering around Makam traditions. Really, we're going to spend our time between the Levant and and Iraq and Persia. So, and we'll stretch a little bit beyond that and go northward toward Anatolia, Turkey, that kind of area. And certainly that encompasses Syria and Lebanon and Israel and Palestine and, as I said before, Iraq. So that's kind of our zone, which is quite large. But essentially, I think what we're looking at is a region that is, its musical practices anyway, have been influenced by the Ottoman Empire as kind of a wrapping up a regional envelope, if you will. And so that's kind of where we're going to be zeroing in when I say Mizrahi. So songlines of Jewish life, I'd like to focus first and foremost on the notion of experiencing sound and the idea of sound in this part of the world. So, you know, sound, active, passive in our lives, we're constantly experiencing sound in these different ways. But some of our philosopher theologians from this region have riffed on the notion of sound being more than something that is simply in the background, even different than something that we take an active role in engaging with, but rather thinking what cumulatively is sound affecting in my being. And so here we find a couple different ideas that I have mentioned here, a couple quotes from Maimonides and Al-Ghazali, who are operational in a generation or two apart, but certainly Maimonides, the great thinker that we know from the Mizrahi world, has himself remarked upon Al-Ghazali's thinking in a couple different ways in a couple different places. So here, though, I want to bring together some ideas about sound. So first and foremost, Maimonides is writing in a teshuvah, in a responsum, about sound and music and its practice and its permissibility in the synagogue. He writes that music occasions delicacy of mind and quickness of impressionability. And here, what he's concerned with is that there, in a very Maimonidean way, there are very few who are sensitive enough to the intensity that music presents in terms of its effects on the body, on the spirit, more so. That such few can really handle it properly, that we have to create some safeguards. So he kind of goes into saying, well, there's all sorts of music and sounds that ultimately are permissible, but we have to be aware and cognizant of the fact that so few can really handle that quickness of impressionability and the delicacy of mind in order to do that. If we back up a little bit to Al-Ghazali, he writes on music that, and on sound in general, that hearts are mines of jewels, There is no way of extracting their hidden things save for the flint and steel of audition. Here, Al-Ghazali is saying that the deepest elements of our heart, our spirit, if you will, you really can't get to extracting the amazing elements of that, of unleashing that spirit without sound, without audition. So we kind of have a little bit of two sides of the coin here. One who's talking about the impressionability of sound and what it can do on our spirit. What we let in becomes part of us. This sounds pretty fitting for a doctor, considering he has written about things having to do with, food and how the cumulative effect of the things that we eat have on our body, on our system. So he's putting it in that frame of reference. On the other side of the coin is Al-Ghazali saying, to really unleash the full potential of the soul has to be done through sound and through in the organization of sound, music. Now, there's a whole range there, of course, of what is music, what is proper to express that soul or to extract those jewels from the heart. But that, in any case, is a little bit of where these two philosopher theologians are kind of thinking about sound and its importance in our being, or especially in our spiritual being. So experiencing beauty is, I think, when we turn our attention to music, because of course our environments are full of all sorts of sounds, and there are sounds that probably grate on our nerves. I'm sure all of you folks in LA who drive in that horrendous traffic know exactly what I'm talking about. But nevertheless, we turn to the beautification of sound, and importantly, the idea of beautifying the way that sacred text is actually presented in sound. So the art of sacred text cantillation in these traditions really centers on fashioning the sound as a vehicle for presenting that most sacred expression. So in Islam, of course, that is the Quran, and in Judaism, it's the Torah. But it's the similar approach to it is that really in both traditions, neither are considering the cantillation of the sacred text as music, not quite music yet, not some background sound that we hear going on, but still some sort of forging of the sound needs to happen, but not in the sense of music. So this approach to text, to sacred text, incantation, if you will, cantillation, is governed by a couple different ideas. In Islam, it's governed by tajweed, which literally means the beautification of the text, and how Islam presents how someone who's chanting the Quran presents the text. It must be very careful in thinking about the beautification of the text. And for Hebrew, the similar idea is hadrut, splendor or glorification, from hidor, or to lahader, to beautify. And so that's an aesthetic necessity in both traditions. Let's take a listen now, just to warm up our ears a little bit, to sacred text cantillation in both traditions. So I'm going to switch us over here to just listening for a moment. We'll start with this bit of text cantillation, and I don't want to belie what it is yet. I don't want to reveal what it is yet, but let us listen, and then we'll I'm sure, pick it up pretty quickly.
الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين.
So we can recognize perhaps what that is. That is chanting the Quran. It's a surah called the Fatiha, which is an opening surah or a verse of the Quran. Now I want to turn our attention to a chanting of Torah, and we'll hear it's actually very, very similar in its approach. We're going to hear actually the first pasuk, the first verse, the Shema, is a little bit different than the Ve'ahavta. Once we get to the Ve'ahavta, the paragraph, that's really where we're going to hear the similarities. But I don't want to leave out the Shema pasuk, so let's listen to that for a second.
Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad.
So we're going to continue on here for just a little bit more and listen to a bit more, but this is Rav Chagai Batzri, who is performing in what we know as the Sepharadi Yerushalmi tradition, which is essentially a conglomeration of different Mizrahi Makam-based traditions, very much governed by the Iraqi tradition, but also Egyptian and Lebanese and Syrian, very similarities there. Of course, in America, we should remember that the Syrian community here in Brooklyn is distinctive in its direct associations with a lineage from Aleppo, and in more recent generation, a large number of immigrants from Damascus. But that is a bit of an anomaly, and there is a Syrian synagogue in Jerusalem that continues to reproduce that patrimony, the Addis synagogue in Nachlaot. But for the most part, in Israel, this Yerushalmi tradition is kind of a mix or conglomeration of these Makam-based, Eastern, Mizrahi-based traditions. So that's where this Rabbi Baal Koreh, or master chanter, is coming from. We should note that, the rules of beautification here of the text are not the same between Quran and Torah. There are similarities. The melodic mode that we hear, certain aesthetics in the vocal production are the same. There are ornamentation of words and things like that, and syllables that start to show a bit of a differentiation. And especially in Islam, there is a practice of actually drawing out melismatically consonants as well as vowels. So we hear that more prominently in chanting of Quran than we do in Torah, although I will say that definitely here's some Baalei Koreh who are incorporating a bit more of that in their Torah chanting as well. Let's turn our attention back to Batzri for a moment and listen to a little bit more of his chanting of the Shema. This is, by the way, in the synonymous melodic mode between both traditions, both the Quran and the Torah. But let us just turn back and listen to him with the Ve'ahavta, and then we'll go back and check out the Al-Fatiha one more time.
ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך. והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך.
So I'm just going to pause there because that's the full first paragraph. Many of us might be familiar with from the Jewish tradition. Let's go back for a moment and listen to the Fatiha.
الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين.
So I'd like to take a moment, actually. Lori, I know this is a little out of order, but before we move to the next section, I'd like to kind of just take a moment where we're less in the performative part of this workshop to reflect a little bit on what I've been discussing at the moment and take any questions that might have already come up about any of this.
Sure. There's already a question actually in the chat that says, how do you distinguish between passive and active sound in prayer?
How do you distinguish between passive and active sound in prayer? That's a good question. I think that I distinguish between active and passive sound, essentially in, whether or not I'm listening to the chazan, the cantor, or participating along with the cantor. In the Mizrahi traditions, that latter is a little more employed in the synagogue practice, where more individuals in the synagogue are engaged actively in the tefillot, in the prayer itself. So, one of the first things people will remark upon who step between an Ashkenazi and a Mizrahi, or by extension Sephardi Mizrahi synagogue, is how everything is performed out loud in the Mizrahi synagogue context. So I think that because everything's out loud, there's already one more step of activity and engagement necessary on the part of your average shul goer. Furthermore, while it's a little bit different in certain traditions, but certainly in most of the Mizrahi communities, there is still a cantor or chazan who steps up to lead the service. They are not doing so until a certain point in the service. You can read our Honorable Mark Kligman's work here on the Syrian communities and the Makam and Liturgy book that he wrote that is so crucial to this discussion, because he is pointing out exactly how and when the chazan kind of takes the reins of the prayer leading. But even as such, when that chazan is leading, they are leading in a way that still demands a lot of activity on the part of the shul goer. I think that certainly we can see, moments of that in Ashkenazi prayer, and in America, in the American context of Jewish practice, there's even more diversity of synagogue approaches and of cantorial and musical approaches in the synagogue that encourage even more activity in different ways. Sometimes that's less text, employing less text, or employing songs that are more, let's say, catchy, something along those lines. But that's still that's being active in the actual sound production. I think that there's still a way to be an active listener that doesn't necessarily place you in making the sound yourself, but perhaps following the sound more closely. And so that would be my sort of thinking about active versus passive sound in a prayer context.
If anyone else has a question, feel free to just unmute yourselves. A nice intimate group here.
I see that, Martha, you've put a question, and I'm just going to reiterate it.
Yeah.
Are there
Oh, sorry, I didn't see
several
it there.
varieties of mode, style, etc. in Islam as there are in Jewish chant, depending on local practice? So that's a good question. There are more distinctive cantillation practices in the Jewish world. There's more room for provincial practices to really happen in the Jewish context. In Islam, there is a way to do tajweed. We certainly have things in the Jewish context like that, in terms of the notion, at least, of the ta'amim being markings that define which syllables of the Hebrew should be accented or emphasized, but not necessarily clear-cut melodic cues from one community to the next. Whereas in Islam, to do the cantillation of Quran is a little bit more widespread, what's the word I'm looking for here? Standardization. There are some differences. Certainly, you can hear a Moroccan chazan, a Moroccan chanter of Quran, and hear perhaps some differences coming out from the Egyptian or the Indonesian, but less so, because the language of that chanting is a specific type of Arabic, right? Fusha, that is considered the highest level of Arabic, and is really only focused on by specialists throughout the Islamic world. Whereas in Jewish practice, the Hebrew is beyond the cantillation of Torah. I mean, you have a lot of Hebrew in the prayers and in the tefillot and in the poetry and things like that. So there is more of a presence of Hebrew usage by more people in the community itself, and therefore there's more room for localized sounds to work their way into the production of the Hebrew itself. So that would be my kind of sense of why there is more variation in Jewish practice than there is in Islamic practice.
Do we have any more questions? Not seeing any coming in.
Okay, so let's turn our attention to the next segment of our workshop, which is really now experiencing tonality. So, we're really going to turn our attention now to the melody itself. We certainly have experienced some tonality in what we were just listening to. And in fact, in both expressions, we were hearing what is called makam. Makam is a word that essentially means place or space, but it's also thought to be synonymous with melodic mode for the music-minded folk, but yet it's more than just the mode, it's how you play the mode. It's really how you express as much as what the actual building blocks are. So, we could look at makam on paper and say, well, it's this note, this note, this note, do, re, mi, fa, mi, re, do, which would be a element of makam, but that is not, that doesn't tell the whole story. So we really have to think about makam as putting us in the place or space of the sound itself. So again, this is back to experiencing sound, or connected to experiencing sound in an active way. Even as a listener, to really follow the makam is to not need to hear a bunch of different notes, but rather a more limited selection of notes, and to be able to really follow where they go. This, by the way, if anybody's familiar with Indian or Hindustani classical music and the raga systems, there are a lot of synonymities here between makam and raga, except that makam operates with some smaller components called jins, typically 4-note groupings, whereas raga the scales can be quite long. So in any case, turning back to the idea of makam as place, the Hebrew word makom is synonymous, place, space. And so we want to actually try and inhabit the space or place of the tone. So let this be our first exercise in makam. So everybody has their computers on mute, so you can sing along at your heart's content. And the only one that you're going to hear really is me, so we don't have to worry about phasing or differentiation or any of that. And just for fun, just for to heighten the mood here, I am going to turn myself into another kind of space and sound. Okay? So hopefully everybody now hears that difference. Yeah, Lori, give me the thumbs up. Yeah, good. So I'm going to introduce first this instrument. This is the ney. The ney is a flute, bamboo flute with 7 holes, 3 on the front, 1 in the back, and of course the bottom of the flute and the top of the flute. It's an end-blown flute, and since it's about air, and we're going to get going with some air, I'm just going to introduce us and give us some sort of centering on sound. I can talk a little bit more about the ney in a moment. So now let us embody a note, just that first tone. Let's try and feel it in our gut. Take a big breath, and when you need to take another breath, just take another breath. This time, let's try and color the sound a little bit. Let's experiment with that. Find the sound that you like in that note. We can stretch the note a little too. Trying to find our way back to the center. We can stretch it, we can vibrato it, we can keep it straight. Now let's go to the next station. I'm going to use the analogy of we're going to travel on the subway because we're in New York in my studio. So we're going to go to the next station, okay? Just to share with you for a moment an experience I'm having right now, I'm making my oud vibrate. My oud is over here on the floor, and I'm going to show you that in a moment, but I'm actually making it vibrate. And that's kind of cool. I wasn't expecting that. So let's try that again. We're going to go between these first two stations, and I'll give you the third station too. We'll go there too. Let's just work with those four notes for a moment. This is a jins called Kurd, like Kurdistan. Let us try and follow me as I am going to travel from station to station. I am the train conductor, but I'm only going to use those four notes. So how'd we do, everybody? Did we follow along? We found the stations? Excellent. So now I'm going to turn our attention to taking this kind of sound in chord, and we're just going to play around with a little bit of prayer text, liturgy, liturgical text. This is El Adon, which is a part of the Saturday morning, Shabbat morning service. And it could be performed in this makam, chord, which, by the way, I actually haven't revealed the entire makam, but just the kind of foundational part of it, which is that jins called chord. And so we can take this first line of text here. I have the Hebrew, the transliteration, and the translation, and we can just look at El Adon Kol Ma'asim. And let's just take our time with each syllable and play, follow me again as I lead us through this expression of chord. So I hope we could all experience a little bit of that. We'll try one more pasuk here. And I am beginning to play with the stations a little bit, right? The different tones. And what I'm hoping is coming out of your side of things on the active listening side. I know that you are participating with me to find the main station, but I hope that you're able to hear the main station, the main part of the makam, the main tone, and experience that even with the window dressing that I'm putting around it in terms of ornamentation. This time I'm going to stretch the makam a little bit further as well. Just follow me. I'm going to take us to a couple more neighborhoods, so to speak. So here's the entire makam just to hear it. How's that, Gary? You following me? Excellent. Good. All right. So let's try. Now I'm going to stretch with the Baruch Umevorach and go a little bit further. Martha, thumbs up. You hear me? You with me? Excellent. I'm going to start at the bottom. Nice. Excellent. So, we are really starting to travel now on the makam. We're starting to journey a bit more. And so that is experiencing tonality. I'm going to turn now to a piece that's in a makam, just a little bit more of a performance side of things. Makam also has aesthetic values associated with it in some traditions. And so there is a makam called tzaba. Tzaba, some of the makams have names that kind of refer to regions. Tzaba is the Arabian Peninsula in the southern part of that. And this, I guess it got its name from a lot of songs that were performed in Tzaba, perhaps. But in the Syrian Halabi tradition, Tzaba refers to or brings forth an idea about covenant. And therefore, Tzaba is used as a makam for the prayers in the service, in the Shabbat services, when dealing with the covenant of Abraham, when he carries out the first Brit Milah on himself at age 90. Ouch, ouch. And then on his children, his sons, right? But it is also therefore reiterated on the Shabbat when we read that story in the parasha, 4 parts of the prayers, and it is also used as kind of the framing for songs. Oops, sorry, yeah, Jane. It's also used as kind of a framing for songs when we are actually doing a Brit Milah. So a whole collection of songs at a Brit Milah could be in Makam Tzaba. So at a Brit Milah, there's usually a service, and one of the favored songs to finish a service with is Yigdal. Many people might be familiar with Yigdal in Friday night services or Saturday morning services. So here is Yigdal, and there are so many melodies for Yigdal, but I'd like to perform for you one and invite you to learn one with me. This is in Makam Tzaba, but a high Tzaba, which means it's just pitched at a higher place than a typical tzaba. Now, unfortunately, I think I have to unshare before I can change my mic to original sound. Okay, let me reshare that for you guys. Okay. Time to bring in my friend here. The first thing I have to do is a taqasim in the makam just to get us in the place and in the space. So how might we describe the experience of that makam? Anybody, you could put in the chat window. What is it? What do you feel? What do you hear? To answer your question, Martha, no fixed do per se. Longing, transcendent, bright. Yeah. Jerry, because that high pitch version of tzaba, joyful. After all, this is the mode of berit, of covenant, right? So there is a joyfulness, but of course, I would say a bittersweet joyfulness. I also feel a little bit of tension here in this song, like I'm about to go under the knife. Repetitious, yes, definitely a lot of repetition here. And some of that is really driven by the poem, the piyut itself, because the piyut itself is a qseda style form based on the Arabic, which it has the o, the toe at the end of every single line. And so, it doesn't have a refrain. It doesn't, the strophes are not composed in such a way that, that encourages other kinds of composition. So it does encourage this kind of repetitiveness, but it also gets us in the zone. The repetitiveness gets us into a particular place, a particular zone, a particular space. So with that said, let's turn our attention now to another piece that we're going to turn to the experiencing text portion. And in our text portion, let's talk about how text is experienced. So, of course, text is super important to Jewish tradition. Something that has encouraged our diasporic transnation to reproduce itself throughout the generations by having something that could be shared and exported and passed around. So one form of text that is very prominent in the Mizrahi world is the piyut, the poem. And this really ties up the Sepharadi Mizrahi world, because many poems could be circulated quite far and wide. So let us take a look at a poem. Let's see if I can bring up one of these great poems of, I would like to share with you Shahar Avakesha, which is a piyut written by the great Shlomo ibn Gviro in the 11th century of Spain. He's one of the golden age poets of Sepharad. And let me just share my screen here and we can talk a little bit more about this poem. So this is Shahar Avakesha. And again, I have the transliteration here, the translation here, and the Hebrew here. Now, we'll notice here we get a little bit more of a change in the Hebrew. We get a kind of quasi-kseda form, very, very much like kseda, finishing with B, 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 and B on each end of the line. Now, that is, of course, a sound, right? A syllabic kind of construct that we can experience and connect with. At the halfway here, the hemistiche, we also get the B, but then after that, he's going to break away from that at the hemistiche. So we get the Bahel, Lashon, Elkain, but we keep and preserve the BBB at the end. So this piece is really in typical Sephardi poetry, we are petitioning the divine with words that are expressing a very direct relationship between the poet and the divine. So a connection here, a vehicle for connection, as I've written in my handout. And he writes, Shahar Avakesha, Tzuri umiskabi. E'aroch lefanecha shahri v'gam arbi. At dawn I seek you, my rock, my fortress, my morning and evening prayers I lay before you. Lifnei gedulatcha e'amod ve'ebahel. Ki eincha tir'eh chol machshavot libi. Now here we're not hearing the tonal, but we are still hearing the musical now in the text itself. Before your greatness, I stand in fright, for your eyes can see into the thoughts of my heart. Mazeh asher yuchal halev v'halashon la'asot umakoach ruhi b'toch qirbi. What is this that the heart and tongue can bring about? And what is the strength of my spirit within me? Hine lecha titev zimrat enosh al ken odcha be'od tihyeh nishmat Eloha bi. And behold, the singing of mankind, of Enosh, will be pleasant to you. And therefore, I thank you while the soul of God is within me. So here's Shahar Avakesha in a Mizrahi mode, in a makam. This is in Nahawand, which is, I'm just going to let you experience the individual sounds of the tones. And again, the takasim on the oud is meant to bring you into the space of the makam. So I want you, on your side of things, you can try and sing with me, playing the individual important notes or stations. So we actually hearing the makam change a little. Oh, sorry. We're actually hearing the makam change a little bit here between the two halves of each verse. And we might hear notes in the tonality of this music that sound a little outside of what we might be used to. You might be thinking, I'm just singing out of tune. And if I were only singing well-tempered music with a piano, I would be singing out of tune. But the piano cannot reproduce these notes that I'm actually performing. But the oud, of course, can, because the oud, which has 6 courses, 5 of which are doubled for volume, is fretless, just like a violin, and frankly, just like the voice. And so there are, of course, the ability to slide between notes. Right? However, there's also the ability to break up the octave into more parts. So in this music, this Mizrahi music, we actually break up the octave not into 12 parts, but into 24 parts. So that means that we're actually having quarter tones rather than semitones between different degrees of the scale. So we can have now semitones, quarter tones, we can have 3/4 tones. So the scale that I was playing, I started with this Makam Nahawan. Okay, not irreproducible on a piano. It could be, but once I did this, okay, that's a 3/4 step. That's a B half flat, which means that it's a note between B and B flat. And the only way you could get that maybe on a piano is if you're a Thelonious Monk, playing both notes at the same time. And then I come to the C, the B half flat, and back to the A. Now that the Yigdal that I played before in Saba used a similar quarter tone in the sound. So now I want to take us to a little bit more of this text. Can you tilt your camera down so we can see it? Yes. Let me hold it up, actually. I think that would be the best, give you the full view here. This is one of my ouds. I have a few of them. This one was made for me in Morocco, so I'm the first owner of it. And they can vary in size and depth, and they have their individualistic personalities, their sounds for sure. And of course, like, you know, many string players, you can really geek out on all of the different size strings and the, you know, different makers of strings and materials. So just depending on some different kinds of brightnesses and things you want to get out of it. But as I was saying before, I was making the oud vibrate. You can actually hear it vibrating a little bit, I hope. So the next piece I want to encourage you to join me on is actually, and I think we can maybe go out a little bit on this, which is to turn our attention to the last part here, which is experiencing intercultural exchange. So the there are 2 pieces actually I wanted to present here, but I'll see if we have time for them both. But in any case, let's start let's start with the samai, and we can do that one more on the instrumental tilt. So a samai is a rhythmic pattern that is 10 beats long. And if you see here in the handout that I supplied, I'll show you how we can understand that 10-beat pattern. Yes, the wood can vary as well. Somebody asked about the wood in Morocco. Hi, Danielle. How are you? I see you. So we have the 10-beat compositional form called a samai. And this has a doom, which is a low sound, and a tak, which is a high sound. And I have a couple dots here for rests. If we count up the letters and the dots, we will get 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Now I'm just going to zoom in on this, make it a bit bigger so that we can see it more clearly. And we can see the doom, rest, rest, tak, rest, doom, doom, tak, rest, rest. So let's practice it together. 8, 9, 10, doom, which I like to do with my hand across like this, okay? And then the tak like this. And that's a low sound and a high sound. Or in Arabic musical theory, a heavy sound and a light stroke. Heavy stroke, light stroke, okay? Let's try the samai together. 7, 8, 9, 10, boom, 2, 3, tak, and boom, boom, tak. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 3. Okay, so that is the samai, and that would be 1 second. And we have my Rick here. That is played on a drum like this. So you can actually also, of course, on a Rick player would play these jingles, and you can get those mixed into the mix. So. That is a drum to play it on, of course. And you can play it in all sorts of different drums. Now I'm going to ask you to play it along with me while I play a little bit of a samai, which is an instrumental piece. Now, again, one of the synonymities between this and Hindustani raga is that when in Hindustani music, there's the tala, which is also a similar sort of rhythmic construct, and active listeners follow along the instrumental music by playing the tala on their laps. In this case, you're actually going to play the dooms and the taks for me where you are, but that's what you would do to really follow along and be an active listener. Okay, so this is samai bayat. That means it's in the makam of bayat, and you're going to play it with me. Let's see. Okay. Ready? I'm just going to play a little bit of it now. Okay. 8, 9, 10. I think we can stay. Let me just keep this in my hand for a moment. With the oud for this last piece. In our last section of our handout, tarkib. In Mizrahi music, it's very common to practice tarkib. Tarkib is the process of replacing the words of the Arabic with Hebrew, but preserving the sound of the Arabic in the Hebrew. So it's not just contrafacta, but literally something more along the lines of tarkib, meaning that we are actually keeping the syllabic sound. So let me show you what I mean. This is a very well-known piece called Fog in Nachal, which is a popular kind of song in the Mizrahi world, in Arabic. And we see here, this is the Arabic, here is the transliteration and the translation. Fog il Nahal, Fog Yaba, Fog Nahal, Fog. So here in the Hebrew we have Kum al Nechal, Shuv Kum. Habakum am Nehal Kum. So we've replaced the Fog with the Kum, but we have the Nahal and the Nehal preserved in the text, not to mention the syllabic construction here. Mizrach Yama Hazek in Hebrew, in the Arabic, Madri Lama Hadak. In the Hebrew, Eretz Chemdat Avot Kum. In the Arabic, Yaba Madri Lama Fog. Wallah Maridak Balini Bilwa. And here, Haba Narima Deglil Yehuda. So there's obviously differences, but the poet, the paitan in this case, is trying to match and mimic the exact sound of the Arabic itself. So the words are written by Menachem Mustaki, who's an active poet, paitan today. And the lachen, or the song, is Fogil Nachal Fog, which is this piece. And so this is where we'll go now. I'll teach it to you. You can sing it with me. Let's go back over with Fog in Nahal. And this is in Makam Hijaz, which sounds pretty familiar to folks. You may know this Makam from the but that's not what we're playing now. Sorry. Fogil Nachal. So I'll take a few more moments. That was a kind of whirlwind tour of our Mizrahi musical traditions. We really experienced the intercultural exchange that we find in the tarkib and in the rhythmic traditions like the samai and so forth, and of course the instruments and things like that. We've experienced text, looking at the piyut as a vehicle, the Hebrew text for composition. We've experienced tonality, makom, makam, really getting into the space of sound and of melody. We've experienced the beauty or the beautification of text, especially cantillation. And that takes us to now, hopefully, going back and experiencing sound, something along the level of what Maimonides and Al-Ghazali have intended for us to think about, which is how the sound can actually be absorbed into our souls and, on the flip side, help release our souls. So that's a little taste of Mizrahi musical traditions.
Wow, thank you so much, Sam. I can we open it up just to see if there's any questions left in the amongst our participants? Feel free to drop them in the chat or unmute yourselves. Any final questions for Dr. Thomas here? I see Toda Rabbah, or today Rabbah, but Jane writes.
Merci Samuel.
Somebody just said thank you, I believe.
Oui, en français.
Oh, bonjour.
Je sais qu'il parle français. Je l'ai rencontré au Maroc.
Pas problème, de rien.
Merci beaucoup. C'est très intéressant.
Excellent. Merci,
Merci,
Daniel.
merci. I see from Jane Soho, I saw Haggai Batsri perform twice and wish he still lived in LA so we could all enjoy his talent. I complimented him so much after one of the performances, and although he was appreciative, he was also quite defensive, arguing that Ashkenazim don't do prayer right because there's comparatively so little music, and that Mizrahi prayer is the right way to do it since all prayers are sung. Thank you so much for putting all of this in perspective and letting us participate in this culture. Those are some really wonderful words from Jane there.
Yeah, you're more than welcome. I hope it did help to contextualize some of where he maybe was intending with some of the active listening of the prayers.
Anything in Arabic, Samuel?
What's that?
Anything you can sing in Arabic?
Well, the Fogi Nachal was in Arabic.
Oh, okay.
And of course, I sing a lot more in the Mughrabi North African Arabic dialect.
Yeah.
So that and Hakatia or Ladino Judeo-Espanol. So those things you can, of course, check out on my website and hear a lot more from my different groups. And inshallah, you'll maybe hear me in person if you're in the LA area. I do make my journeys out there from time to time.
When you come back to LA?
I'm not sure when, but soon I hope. I need some sunshine.
There is a program.
We have plenty of it to go around.
In Los Angeles at Emma Banim Synagogue on November 16.
Oh, I don't think I'll be there that soon. Okay. But I'll cook something up with Lori, I promise.
Well, I think on that note, just a final thank you, Sam. This has been just such a pleasure to really try to dive in and not only try to participate in it, but really understand the structural and cultural elements to it. This has been incredibly insightful, and I really just thank you for bringing this to our community. And then, of course, thank you to our community for being here. Thank you all for continuing to support the programs of the Lowell Milken Center. Sam, I want to make sure I give you a final opportunity. If anyone wanted to hear any of your recordings, see more of your work, et cetera, where could that be done?
Well, you can look at the bottom of your handout. There are a couple website addresses there for my Ensemble Asefa, which kind of has many different iterations, from the traditional to the jazz infused, and the New York Andalus Ensemble, which really focuses around North African and Spanish traditions. You can find both of those ensembles online, in which case you can click to my YouTube playlist and go down that rabbit hole to your heart's content. And you may even check out some of my jazz trio stuff while you're there.
All right. Well, thank you all so much. Thank you, Sam. Thank you, all of our participants who joined us today, and have a wonderful rest of your week, a wonderful evening. Thank you all.